Welcome to Yahoo Sports Daily. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. We are here for the next 2 hours to get you caught up on everything you need to know that's happening right now in the world of sports. We were, in full transparency, going to start with some college football playoff reactions, and we will get there. But instead, we start the morning with some shocking breaking news that we woke up to. CP3, Chris Paul, posting to his Instagram story that he'd been, quote, sent home by the Clippers. The team is parting ways with him. They are, quote, severing ties with him. However you want to word it, Chris Paul will no longer be with the Clippers moving forward. Now, Kelly Iko is going to join us later in the show to help break it down further. I want to stress to everybody right now, it looks very likely the Clippers will try to work out a trade for Chris Paul, but they can't do that until December 15th. That's the earliest possible date that move can happen. So, I ask you, Caroline Fenton, your initial reaction to this breaking news.
Shocked. I think we can all say it was initial shock and awe. And when you saw the tweets coming in, I had to click and make sure I wasn't getting some spam account. But no, it was real. And I think one reason why I was so shocked, one reason of many, was that I knew, and we talked about this yesterday, we knew that an eventual breakdown of the Clippers was inevitable, right? I thought Ty Lue being let go of his position as head coach of the Clippers was inevitable. I just didn't think that Chris Paul would be the first domino to fall, making the assumption that this is the first domino of many to fall. Because if I ran the Clippers, I would clean house, trade everybody, move on from everybody, fire everybody, rip it down to the studs, and start this thing anew. Because that's how big of a dumpster fire the Clippers organization and the team is right now. So why Chris Paul is my question. Why is Chris Paul the first domino? Why was Chris Paul, the first one that the Clippers kind of tabbed as this is going to be the first, I would assume, of many moves to make? Why is it a guy who is a cornerstone of your organization, albeit in the twilight of his career? I understand that. But a guy who is known as one of the greatest, if not the greatest Clippers of all time. Why Chris Paul first?
My honest answer to that is because Chris Paul, as an NBA player, no longer really matters. Like the legend of Chris Paul, you mentioned how important he is to the legacy of the Clippers. I buy that all day. That means nothing for right now. I mean, if you start talking about who Chris Paul is today, I would argue that this version of Chris Paul is kind of like talking about Shaq as a Celtic. That's right. Remember, Shaq was a Celtic in his last year. Like Chris Paul hasn't played meaningful, important basketball in years. So if you're the Clippers and you're looking around, and as you referenced, and we talked about on the show, Steve Ballmer, that owns the team, went to the organization and said, I want it fixed. He went to Ty Lue and said, figure this out, right? And when you start thinking about how you figure this out, well, an easy thing to do to start with is just, 14 minutes? You're looking at 14 minutes for what? If you look at the actual production of Chris Paul right now, I would argue that Chris Paul as a name is far more important than Chris Paul as a basketball player. So you send him home because you don't want to risk any injury. You're going to either cut him or trade him. God knows if there's any value left for him. He just announced recently this was going to be his last season, right? So there's no point in having him play it out there. And if you're Ty Lue, I think this is a bit of a statement to the entire roster of, hey, this is the beginning of change. Your only hope of keeping your job is to show everybody that you can build something moving forward, and maybe you just can't do that with Chris Paul being part of this. Like, this is where the legend of Chris Paul feels a lot more important than the actual player that Chris Paul is today. And as somebody that, frankly, just I don't care about history with franchises. I care about winning right now. If I ran an organization, if I was a fan of an organization, any team that I'm a fan of, I don't really give a damn about what you've done for my team. I give a damn about what you will do for my team. And if I look around and think, man, the minutes, the points, they don't equal the equation of being worth it, not knowing what he's like in the locker room, not knowing maybe there's a rub, maybe there isn't. But this is an easy one to just walk away from when the team stinks.
I hear you that 1000% your number one focus needs to be how can we win basketball games? My question is, how is moving on from Chris Paul help you win basketball games? I said it yesterday. The Clippers need to fire Ty Lue. It's time. It's been past due. But firing Ty Lue doesn't all of a sudden solve all of the Clippers' issues. The Clippers' issues run very deep, both on and off the court, and we know that very well. So what is moving on from Chris Paul, leaving Chris Paul at home? What does that necessarily do for this Clippers team? Because I view this, Fitz, I think there are very rare instances in sports where everything works out for everybody. A trade, a move, whatever it might be, where both sides kind of get something equal out of it. This is one of those instances where I don't really know what anybody gets from this. Sure, the Clippers move on from Chris Paul, and maybe this move makes a whole lot more sense down the line whenever we start to see those more and more dominoes start to fall. But I hate this for Chris Paul. I hate this. He's in the twilight of his career. He's already said that he's going to retire after this season. After, a 40-year-old guy after 21 years of service in the association. And I understand that this is NBA, this is, not NBA.gov. Like, this is a for-profit business. This is a Clippers organization that is in the business of making money and winning games, not all the warm and fuzzies. I understand that. But Chris Paul's been in the league for 21 seasons. Is this how he goes out? Because the Clippers have said, we'll help him find a landing place. That's great and all, and that's wonderful PR. What other team in the league is going to give up actual tangible assets for Chris Paul? I wouldn't. What team in the league is Chris Paul all of a sudden going to elevate and make better? This just kind of feels like this is a very anticlimactic ending to what was a legendary career.
You're not wrong, and unfortunately, that's just the way it goes sometimes. To your question of how does this help the Clippers today, I don't think it does. I do think it's important to note Lawrence Frank texted a statement to ESPN, and this is what he said, part of what he said. We're parting ways with Chris. He'll no longer be with the team. We'll work with him on the next step of his career. This is the important part. Chris is a legendary Clipper who has had a historic career. I want to make one thing very clear. No one is blaming Chris for our underperformance. I accept responsibility for the record we have right now. There's a lot of reasons why we've struggled. We're grateful for the impact Chris has made on the franchise. I just think, to your point, what makes the Clippers better this year? Nothing. Nothing is going to make the Clippers better this year. Nothing is going to change the fact that this is a team that is absolutely fallen apart. They've lost 14 of their last 16 games. They've lost 5 straight. They're 5-16 right now. There is no hope for the Clippers. But at some point, you got to look in the mirror. I say this all the time. One of the toughest things in anybody's life to do is to look in the mirror and say, wow, I got fat, and now I got to fix it. And there's not always an easy solution. Sometimes you just got to go day by day and do all the little things. I think this is the first of a bunch of moves the Clippers are going to have to make to acknowledge, hey, we built it, we tried it, we failed, and now we need to rip it apart all the way down to the studs to try again.
But also, I think the Clippers not only are in a period of basketball rehabilitation, I think the Clippers also need to be in PR rehabilitation for several different reasons. And what does moving on from Chris Paul do to rehabilitate your public perception? Because now the public perception of the Clippers, or at least the perception to players around the league, is that the Clippers aren't loyal to their superstars. Because Blake Griffin was a superstar with the Clippers. They shipped him away. Chris Paul is a superstar with the Clippers, albeit a much different player now than he was in his prime. I totally, wholeheartedly understand that. And I understand that this is a business and basketball move. But they shipped Chris Paul, left him in Atlanta, just left him for dead in Atlanta. So now what the Clippers have done, and I understand it, you have to do what you have to do. This is probably one of many moves. I understand that. But what you're doing is also damaging your reputation around the league and saying, look, we don't care what you mean to this organization. We don't care that you are viewed as one of the greatest to ever wear this uniform. That doesn't make you any more protected or secure here than anybody else.
Yeah, but the hard part about all of that, yes, you're right. And legends matter in PR and the way you handle it. We always talk about what matters in the locker room. But at the same time, to me, I keep saying this. If you want to be the best team in the NBA right now, there's a very clear, succinct model in how you do it. You draft, you develop, and you bring guys together up at once. The Clippers aren't trying to do that. The Clippers went to the status of mercenary, and they brought CP3 back to be part of a team of mercenaries. Let's get a bunch of big names. We're going to bring them together, and everybody will pay attention to us as a brand. That just doesn't work. I mean, look, the fact is here, I don't think Chris Paul is going to have any value to any notable NBA team right now. So I'd love to see a world where he goes out and wins a ring, because that's just a great story for a player that a lot of people have rooted for a long time. I love that concept. But I don't see any path in my mind where suddenly somebody's going to give up assets to bring in Chris Paul as the necessary piece. Like if you're Oklahoma City, you do not need Chris Paul. If you're the Denver Nuggets, you do not need Chris Paul. Like we can go up and down the list here and ask ourselves how many teams are actually going to be better. Not with the video game version of, not with the name, not with the reputation, but with the actual player, Chris Paul. And the answer to me is none. And if we're sitting here saying, man, no team worth a damn really needs Chris Paul, then the answer to me is that the Clippers weren't worth a damn when they brought him in. This has just all been so failed because they've been worried about brands that they bring in. I would argue, to your point, they have a PR problem today because they were more worried about being popular than they were worried about being good for the last several years, and it just hasn't worked.
And it's fair. And to your point, I mean, I've seen OKC, CP3 to OKC all over my Twitter feed. And it's a cute Disney Channel story. It really is. Bring him home. Give Chris Paul the opportunity to win a championship in his final season in the league. That all sounds really nice and good and everything. Why would Oklahoma City do that? I mean, Oklahoma City has an absolute wagon of a team up and down the roster. So why would you bring in Chris Paul and give up assets to acquire him? Albeit, I don't think it's going to be, any kind of crazy assets, but why would you give up any assets and disrupt what you already have working? Bring him home. I don't necessarily buy into that. I would say the value around the league or a team that would be interested in the efforts of Chris Paul would be a young team that's looking for veteran presence, a young team that needs that kind of experienced voice, kind of mentor. And that's the value that you would be getting far more than you would be getting his efforts on the court.
Yeah. And I hear that. God, I feel like everybody watching is going to feel like I'm some sort of Chris Paul hater. I'm not. I'm a logical separator of greatness and your resume versus what you offer a team today. So I would ask the world, when's the last time we saw truly impactful, meaningful basketball from Chris Paul? When is the last time that we saw night in, night out? To your point, if you need a vet leader that's going to come in and be a spark plug for a young team, and maybe a place like Charlotte is looking at that, maybe suddenly you think that Chris Paul can be a great influence to Ja Morant. Okay, well, if they go to places like that, A, Chris Paul's not going to get the one thing he's coveted, which is an opportunity at a ring. But B, just look at the minutes. On an awful Clippers team, he's playing 14 minutes a game, right? You just look at the overall production and ask, when's the last time that a team really looked at Chris Paul and said, oh my God, this is the guy. He hasn't even hit double digits in average points in 4 years? Looking at it here, he hasn't played meaningful basketball essentially since COVID. Like when we parse it out like that, I hear you. And this is not a litigation by me of the resume of Chris Paul and the respect for the Hall of Famer that he certainly is. Like, there are two separate conversations to me. Chris Paul, the legend, and Chris Paul, the current NBA player. And the current 40-something-year-old NBA player doesn't, to me, bring enough extra benefit to make it worthwhile, even if you think he can be an ear, a voice in Ja Morant's ear, which I don't necessarily think is the right approach.
I don't know about that. That would feel so unfair to Chris Paul to be like,
Facts.
Here is this guy
Don't be a
who has
babysitter.
been, yeah, right. Like, here's this guy who has been nothing but a problem off the court for Memphis. Chris Paul, maybe you can save him. Like, that's such an unfair thing to ask of Chris Paul. You bring up Charlotte. I think the Hornets could be fascinating. One thing that we've said a lot about LaMelo is he needs to grow up a little bit. He needs to find that sense of maturity. Yes, he can fill the seats right now, but what is his longevity and future in Charlotte if he can't stop getting out of his own way? Maybe Chris Paul can be that kind of mentor for him, because it's not like LaMelo Ball has had Ja Morant level off the court issues. Maybe what Charlotte with, Con Canipple as a rookie, LaMelo that just needs to kind of grow up a little bit, a young team, maybe what they would need. And I hear you on the basketball side of things, because anybody who acquires Chris Paul is not acquiring him to all of a sudden play 30 minutes a game and drop 25 on any given night. You're not getting that from Chris Paul. Let's be realistic. But a team like the Hornets might sign up for the wisdom, so to speak, of Chris Paul and a veteran presence in that locker room.
You're right. I don't want Chris Paul to have to be a babysitter, and I don't want Chris Paul to be a useless sympathy ring on a team that doesn't need him anyway. And when I take those two categories out, man, it is hard for me to find a spot for Chris Paul. I will
what's left?
stress.
The Clippers.
Yeah, and a season full of aspiration and a season full of salary cap cheating. It feels like it's only going to get worse for the Clippers from here. I have a sneaky. We both agree on this before we wrap. Real quick, is this the last weird move for the Clippers this season? If you had to bet your house on it, is this the last? See?
Oh, this is the first of many. We have just peeled back the first layer of a lot of muck underneath with the Los Angeles Clippers.
It's about to get crazier if that's even possible. One thing we're sure of, the Clippers are always going to Clipper. We'll keep you updated on the breaking news
Clip
as
gonna
we
clip.
get more of it. Plus, again, Kelly Eco going to join us in a little bit. We'll talk to him about the news. In the meantime, College Football Playoff Committee made a huge statement last night. We'll tell you about it next. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. We wondered what sort of a statement that the College Football Playoff Committee would make, and they made one. Alabama's Iron Bowl win carried more weight than Notre Dame's over Stanford because now Alabama has moved ahead of Notre Dame in the penultimate College Football Playoff rankings. And Caroline, it's a big statement because we're keeping an eye on bid thieves. And for anyone that hasn't paid attention to the College Football Playoff, the way it works, the top 12 teams get in, but the highest ranked group, 5 conference champions are all guaranteed a bid. So right now there's the possibility, for example, if BYU to beat Texas Tech, there's a chance that they would have to be guaranteed a playoff spot. Also, a school like James Madison is going to be guaranteed a playoff spot from the group of 5. So what happens is right now, the number 11, number 12, maybe even the number 10 team could all be thieved, robbed of their bid in the college football playoff. We thought that would be Alabama at the 10th spot, right in that uncomfortable spot. But instead, Bama leapfrogs Notre Dame. What do you make of it?
That's the biggest takeaway from last night. That was the biggest statement that the College Football Playoff Committee made last night was we are going to ensure that Alabama does not fall into that vulnerable area in that 10 to 12 kind of gray area range. And I think it's strange because the committee's been awfully consistent with putting Notre Dame over Alabama over the last several weeks. And the justification from Hunter Yurachek, the new chair of the College Football Playoff Committee, I thought was totally strange and weird and odd and off base and really baseless. He said, oh, well, Alabama at one point had a 17-0 lead in a rivalry game. Yeah, but they also were tied with Auburn, who is not making a bowl game and fired their coach mid-season. And since when is playing in a rivalry game any sort of bullet point on the College Football Playoff Committee's, bullet points of resume boosters? So I just thought that was Hunter Yurachek's way of kind of bumbling and fumbling his way to justifying putting Alabama Alabama above Notre Dame. If the committee believes that Alabama is just better than Notre Dame, then fine, then so be it. I don't argue with that because I think that Alabama has much stronger wins on their resume than Notre Dame does. Alabama went into Athens, a place where Georgia does not lose, and beat them fair and square, beat Georgia in their own house. That is far and beyond a better win than Notre Dame has on their resume. Save me and spare me with the USC win. So I don't necessarily disagree with it. I just think it's strange that this is the week that they're making that change. But what the committee is telling us is even if Alabama loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game, Alabama will still be safe. And Alabama, more than likely, of course, anything weird and crazy can happen in conference championship weekend. But for right now, I think it's safe to say that Alabama, regardless of the result of the SEC championship game, will be in the college football playoff.
So as many people know, I worked at ESPN for several years. And as part of my job, I hosted a college football playoff ranking show. And for years, right after Reese talked to the committee chair, I did the same exact thing. I've talked to several committee chairs. The job that Yurachek has done as committee chair has been absolutely inexcusable, because one thing he revealed last night is, I will tell you that this is his quote. I will tell you that the debate between Alabama and Notre Dame the past 3 weeks has been one of the strongest debates we've had in the room for the past 2 years that I've been a member of the committee. That's fine. You had an open mic opportunity to tell everybody that week in and week out. That's part of the reason that the commissioner comes on, is to give clarity on what the room is debating at the highest possible level so that we all know where there's the possibility for tweaks. I just want a consistent committee, right? And what I begged for years, even when I worked at ESPN, was that, frankly, I think every single committee member should be put on a stage with a mic in front of them, and they should have to answer for their votes. They should have their votes just as public in every possible way as every other award where we come out, we get to later find out who voted for who for MVP. I believe strongly that every member in the committee should have to answer for the why, but they don't make that happen. If they're going to put it on a committee chair, then that chair needs to be thorough every week in the expectation and in what they're seeing. We've heard so much about the debate between Miami and Notre Dame. And now, for the first time, we hear about a debate between Alabama and Notre Dame that was the most heated debate he's seen in the entire time that he's been on the committee. I'm not buying any of it. All of this just feels like manufactured garbage while they're trying to figure out a way to justify a movement they felt like making, because this has been a feels committee. This isn't a facts committee. It's an eye test committee, which means they could just look at it and say, well, I value rivalry games, and that's what I'm going to choose to do. Now, they have that right as committee members, Caroline, but I think this is the biggest flaw that we've seen from the committee, that they're just going to come out and now suddenly, when they have every week, they have a national audience where they can explain themselves. They don't explain anything about Alabama, Notre Dame until they make a wild change that nobody saw coming after wins that I think were equally convincing for both sides.
To discount Notre Dame Stanford when they beat Stanford 49-0, and I know it's Stanford. It's not necessarily anything that you're going to write home about, but also so is this Auburn team, an Auburn team that Alabama went down to the wire with. So I don't overall disagree with Alabama being a better or a more deserving college football playoff team. Now, they have a worse loss than Notre Dame, let's be fair there, but they also have a better win. So whatever you prioritize, I prioritize winning more than I prioritize losing. But I digress there. But for this move to happen this week, and for us to get such a weird, mucky answer about it, I think it's I'm not going to say unsettling, because I don't totally disagree with the move, but it's inconsistent. That's my issue with human involvement into the playoff structure. I think that's also a big concern for a lot of college football fans everywhere. Inconsistency week to week, inconsistency whenever you're evaluating team to team, inconsistency whenever you are ranking 1 to 2 and 2 to 4 and 5 to 6. Because, we talk about, wins and losses. Well, if we want to talk about wins and losses, we can talk about Notre Dame and Miami, another very hotly contested 2-horse race. And the committee is telling you it's very close between those two, because they have Notre Dame at 10, they dropped Notre Dame to 10, and they have Miami at 12. Well, the data points are so close, and they're ranked very closely together. But Miami beat Notre Dame head to head. Now, granted, Miami lost at home to Louisville. You can't do that. When you do things like that, then your resume now gets picked apart and you get put under the microscope. That's not a position that any team in college football wants to be put under, especially in a weak conference like the ACC. But we can't use those head-to-head data points when it's convenient and then conveniently ignore them when it comes to Notre Dame and Miami.
How do you feel about Ole Miss? And, obviously Ole Miss kept themselves in a good standing. They did not move despite no Lane Kiffin and much of their offensive staff being gone. So for anyone that hadn't seen it, Ole Miss's former offensive coordinator, Charlie Weiss Jr., is coming back to Ole Miss for the playoffs. But even that, Lane Kiffin announced late yesterday afternoon, as Heather Dinich pointed out. By the time that was announced, the committee had already done their full meeting. So that had no impact on the committee's decision. They met Monday and Tuesday morning. It wasn't decided that Weiss was coming back until Tuesday afternoon. So that was just usual Lane Kiffin showboating. So my question here is, are you surprised that Ole Miss didn't move at all?
Well, they moved up. They did move up to number 6.
My bad. They didn't move
that
down. Sorry,
is
I've said
more didn't move down. Yeah, you're right. Which is, I think,
My
was
bad.
a big question of mine going into these rankings was, would they be penalized very similarly to Florida State being penalized a couple of years ago when Jordan Travis, their starting quarterback, was hurt in the middle of the season. Florida State was, late in the season. Florida State was eventually penalized and left out of the college football playoff despite being ACC champions, despite being undefeated, albeit in a 4-team playoff, so a little bit different. But they were left out of the playoff because the committee said, well, they don't have their quarterback. They're not the same team. And when you look into the committee's bylaws, rules, regulations, whatever you want to call them, if they even abide by them, that the committee reserves the right to penalize teams if they don't have a player or a coach. Clearly, that didn't matter to them. Now, them moving up, Ole Miss moving up, wasn't like a, yeah, Ole Miss, you're better because you don't have Lane Kiffin kind of thing. No, it was a result of Texas A&M losing to Texas. They fell out of that top 5 spot, so that inevitably moved Ole Miss up. Good for Ole Miss. I hoped, and look, you can see the LSU helmet behind me. Lane Kiffin's my new head coach. So I'm involved into this, I guess, slightly, at least emotionally, a little bit in my fandom, but good for Ole Miss. I'm glad the committee didn't penalize Ole Miss because I do think there is a different situation with a quarterback in a 4-team playoff versus a coach and a 12-team playoff. I hope that Ole Miss doesn't get penalized for not having their head coach because that doesn't seem fair. It wasn't the coach that went out there and won all those games. It was the players. And the players, I think, will be galvanized more than ever with their head coach saying, hey, look, I know that you're on a path to a national championship, but deuces, I'm leaving because I like gumbo more than I like fried catfish.
Yeah, and there is an element for me where Ole Miss had the advantage of not having played a game without Lane. So we have no idea what they look like. The committee doesn't penalize them. If they'd gone out and laid an egg in the Egg Bowl without Lane Kiffin, that could have been a difference. One other thing, for anyone that hasn't seen it, Diego Pavia out here, the quarterback at Vanderbilt, he's tweeting the president, trying to get an executive order signed to expand the college football playoff to 16 because it is so unjust that Vanderbilt didn't make it. This Caroline, like, look, you and I both spent a lot of time in Nashville. I lived in Nashville for over 20 years, right? So there's plenty of love, fine, for Vandy. I'm not a Vandy fan, but I love the city and the school. The one thing I would say about all of this is, like, this is part of why the playoffs are magical to me. If everybody gets in, then this conversation, this yelling, this screaming, which I think it helps the popularity of the sport, it helps people have conversation pieces about the sport, it goes away. The farther we expand this thing, the more automatic everything becomes, the less we're talking about college football every week on Tuesday and Wednesday because, frankly, the committee creates conversation creates growth, and drama helps sports grow. So, I get it. Fine, Diego, you can try all day long. I think the president might have better things to do than make sure Vandy gets into the college football playoff. But at some point, if you're Vandy, it sucks that it went this way, but that's just one of the beautiful things about college football to me.
It might behoove Diego Pavia to just put the phone down. Been wanting to send him that message over the last few weeks. Just don't post it. Just don't say the thing. Just keep your mouth shut. And look, in the college football playoff, it doesn't matter if you expand to 64 teams. The 65th and the 66th team will feel like they got screwed. In a 12-team playoff, the 13th and 14th team will feel like they get screwed. There will always be somebody that feels like they got screwed over. That is not justification to expand the playoff. And look, I thought it was very unfair, the justification for Vanderbilt not getting into that group that could potentially be on the bubble. Because they said, well, Tennessee is no longer ranked. That's no longer a ranked win. Well, yeah, Tennessee's no longer ranked because Vanderbilt beat them. Like, that's not fair. But yeah, you can pick apart some of Vanderbilt's wins. They beat LSU, which at the time felt like a really big win. Well, LSU ended up firing their coach and going 7-5. That's not as good of a win as maybe it felt at the time. So you can pick apart Vanderbilt's resume, and they don't have as good of a win as, let's say, Texas does, beating Texas A&M. And Texas beat Vanderbilt head-to-head. So I don't think the committee necessarily got it wrong. I hate it for Vanderbilt. I really, really hate this for Vanderbilt because this is the best season in program history. That I think that Vanderbilt is on the ascension. We just saw a 5-star quarterback flip from Georgia to Vanderbilt. That is a sign of the times. We're living in a new college football world now than we ever have lived. But this year, I think that the College Football Playoff Committee wanted to be very careful and rewarding teams for scheduling those really difficult non-conference Power 4 matchups, which Texas did. And Texas gets rewarded for not just scheduling Ohio State, but for also beating one of the best teams in the country in Texas A&M.
From football to football, we'll get back to college football, but it is a huge, huge time for the MLS Cup and for the World Cup. We'll tell you about it next. Yahoo Sports Daily. The matchup is set. Messi and Inter Miami hosting Vancouver for all the marbles in the MLS Cup. Messi's first MLS Cup since arriving here in the States. To help break it down, the man that wrote the book on Messi, literally, Luis Miguel Echegaray, which by LME, like everybody that's ever worked with him, LME, we've worked together a lot over I think that's the first time I've ever even tried to say your last name. So the book called Messi Mania, just an amazing, amazing expert to help us break it all down. So let's get right to it, brother. Tell everybody why this could be the biggest MLS Cup ever.
First of all, Caroline, pleasure to meet you. Fitz, it took my wife a few years to even say my last name, so don't worry about it. It's fine. But I'm so happy to be here to talk a really big week. And we begin, as you mentioned, of course, with MLS Cup. Lionel Messi, arguably the greatest player the game has ever seen, facing in his first ever MLS Cup since he arrived in 2023 to Inter Miami. Now he's facing with Inter Miami Vancouver Whitecaps. And that man right next to him that you can see on the screen is Thomas Müller, the World Cup champion, the Champions League champion, and a foe of Messi, because it was his Germany that beat Messi's Argentina in the World Cup in 2014. It was also his Bayern Munich, everybody, that destroyed Messi's Barcelona 8-2. So Messi knows all too well how to face him. But it's not just about these two guys. These are two very, very good clubs. Inter Miami on a historic run, scored the most goals, including playoffs and regular season, in record MLS single season history. We know about Lionel Messi, but they have a tremendous squad as well. Defensively, they're looking good. In the playoffs, in the last 3 games, they've only conceded 1 goal and scored 13. They're an absolute fire. So this is going to be a great final. MLS is already talking about record numbers in terms of viewership for the playoffs. I am sure that when you include Apple and linear TV, this is going to be a great MLS Cup on Saturday.
Absolutely, it is. Whenever you have a superstar, international superstar, and Lionel Messi playing for the owner of his squad, David Beckham. I mean, it's a who's who and a star-studded event with Inter Miami, but they'll have their hands full with Vancouver. In fact, Taylor Twellman said he actually believes that Vancouver could upset Messi and his squad in this game. But do you think Messi gets it done for his owner, David Beckham?
Well, Caroline, I love Double T, and I partly agree. This is not going to be a walk in the park for Inter Miami, okay? They're clearly the favorites. They're at home. They're going to be at Chase Stadium in Fort Lauderdale. They're going to have all that energy, as you mentioned, the glamour and the glitz of David Beckham and all his friends. But this is a very good Inter Miami team. However, I do agree with Taylor Twellman that Vancouver Whitecaps have a shot. Let's remember that this is Jesper Sorensen, the head coach, his first season as well, just like Javier Mascherano on the other side. This is a club, Vancouver Whitecaps, that, by the way, recorded the most points in club record history, the most wins and the most goals this season. They went to San Diego FC and beat them. They beat LAFC in penalty, so they're not scared. And it's not just about Thomas Müller. You know, they have a very good young core group, including, Seb Berhalter, who's trying to fight for a spot in the World Cup and the USMNT as well. So this is a really good, solid, united Vancouver Whitecaps looking to become the first Canadian team to win in a few years since Toronto FC did it. So they're not going to be afraid. But I got to say, they have to be perfect. They have to be excellent to beat Inter Miami, because they are very good, not just offensively, but defensively. I think being at home is going to help them. Oh, and by the way, they happen to have Lionel Messi, who is on his way on winning a back-to-back MVP, which no player in the history of MLS has ever done. So it's going to be a mountain to climb, a snowy mountain, I guess, but they do have a chance. But Inter Miami, I think, are the favorites here.
Let's just be honest. Twellman's only saying that because Beckham's the only person that's ever had better hair than Double T's ever had. So I'm just saying, we all know that. All right, so LME, that's another reason you're here is the World Cup draw. We all know the World Cup will be here before we know it. So get everybody caught up on what the draw is all about.
Oh, Fitz, what question are you asking me right now? I'm going to try and make this nice and short for our audience, because it is going to be a long one. This is the Men's World Cup next summer. 48 teams, everybody. It's the biggest, largest World Cup in the history of the competition, meaning that the World Cup draw is going to be just as big. It's going to be massive. So, you already have 42 teams confirmed. And by the way, the event is in Washington, D.C. at the Kennedy Center. 42 teams have been confirmed. The remaining 6 are playing in the playoffs in March. So 48 spots available. And here's how you do it. There's 12 groups, Group A to Group L. There's 4 pots. So it's a kind of like a Mega Millions jackpot lottery situation where you have 12 teams in each spot. Pot 1 has the strongest teams per FIFA rankings, including the host, the US, Mexico, and Canada. Pot 2 has the second 12 strongest teams, and so on. And what you're going to see is you're going to see a person, literally guests, participants in the draw, pick out a ball from each spot, and a computer will analyze alphabetically and by order each group, 12 groups of 4 teams. So, it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of groups are going to be, determined, because we're talking now about 12 groups, which has never happened in the competition. And for the first time in World Cup history, everybody, the top 4 FIFA ranked teams, if they win their groups, They won't face each other until the semifinals. It's kind of like what you see in tennis in a Grand Slam tournament, where the 4 top-seeded tennis players kind of are, seated on opposing sides of the bracket. That's what you're seeing at the World Cup. So yeah, get ready. I hear that Kevin Hart is hosting with Heidi Klum. There should be some musicians there, some artists. Gianni Infantino, FIFA president, likes to go big. This is the biggest World Cup in the history of the competition. So we'll have to see what happens on Friday, noon Eastern at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C.
I wonder where our invitation went, Fitz. They said Kevin Hart, Heidi Klum, Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz. Strange that they're having
it went
such
right
a
where it's right where we
big
expected.
event.
We're in the pack. We're way back. Yeah.
Lost in the mail. Surely that's where our invitation is. LME, I am.
Hey, listen, I cover this sport, and I definitely don't get an invite. So there you go.
Well, you would be at the top of our list. But I believe that the path to any championship, sometimes there's a little bit of luck involved, and part of that luck is the draw that you might get. So what are, let's say, 3 teams that the United States should hope and pray that they do not land?
Yeah, Caroline, that's a great question. And a reminder to everybody, like I said, right? The US, alongside Mexico and Canada, are in pot 1. And that means that they're very lucky that in a group stage, they won't face a Spain and Lamine Yamal. They won't face an Argentina and Messi. They won't face France and Kylian Mbappe, or England. So, that's a good thing. However, to your point, in pot 2, there's no slackers here. There's some very good teams, as well as group 3 and 4. So when I look at pot 2, I don't think the U.S. wants anything to do with Morocco, who became the first Arab and African nation to reach a semifinal in the World Cup back in Qatar in 2022. This is a very good team who have won 18 straight matches in all competitions. That's a record in international soccer. So that's one of them in pot 2. The other one, I think, Colombia. Colombia are a very good team. And a reminder, everybody, because the World Cup is in the United States, right? I think every team has an argument to say that they're the home team. And Colombia, absolutely. Because let me tell you, let's say the U.S. plays Colombia, somewhere in the U.S. You think that the U.S. fan base is going to overwhelm the Colombian one? No, I don't think so. So, you have to really pay attention to the fact that there's going to be a tremendous amount of support for all these teams. The other one is Norway as well, by the way, which is in pot 3. Oh, they're in pot 3, but they won every single game in qualifiers to get to the World Cup. They have Erling Haaland, the Manchester City striker, who is basically a combination of Otani and Giannis, all in one as a soccer player. This is one of the best strikers in the game, and it's Norway in pot 3, so they don't want to face them as well. And then in pot 4, there might be some European teams as well, like Italy, for example, but also Ghana, a very strong African team and a foe of the USMNT because they faced them each other in the past. So even though the US won't play your Spains or your Argentinas in the group stages, there's still a lot of really difficult teams to face. I don't want them to see Morocco at all. I mentioned Norway, Ghana, but there's plenty more competitors, everybody. The USMNT are looking good, but it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens. And by the way, final note, right before the World Cup begins, they have just announced some friendlies, some warm-up games for the USMNT, and they're playing Cristiano Ronaldo's Portugal. They're playing Germany. These are good teams, Belgium, good teams that are going to test the United States right before the World Cup.
Your energy is infectious. Your love for the sport just comes across. And most importantly, I'm going to walk into a bar when all this starts and say, man, we don't want Morocco, because then everyone's going to think I am brilliant. LME, appreciate you, my friend. You got to come back and keep getting us updated on this. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Absolutely. And by the way, the last time we saw each other, Fitz, we were talking about the best Christmas movie. And I feel like, Home Alone remains the absolute winner. But I can't remember if you agree with me or not.
I'm a Grinch guy. But I'll give you Home Alone. I'll give you Home Alone's a standard. It's I'm just a little off center. I like my Christmas movies more animated. That's a
no love for Elf.
Elf is a great movie. It's a tremendous movie. Absolutely. Are you kidding?
Classic.
I love you. I love you. I love you.
that. There's no better way. You'll always be my buddy, the Elf. LME, thanks for hanging out with us, brother. We'll keep you guys updated on everything you need to know for the World Cup and, of course, the MLS Cup. In the meantime, Thursday Night Football, trustometer? Either way, huge matchup. We'll tell you about it next. Dak Prescott, first in passing yards, first in yards per game, first in QBR, second in touchdown passes, fifth in completion percentage. Of course, I can't imagine that Cowboys' due diligence as a Twitter handle is at all biased, but Dak Prescott is an MVP candidate, all right? We have a Thursday night matchup. We love to call these things on this show the matchup of the century of the week, and that is what we have on Thursday Night Football because we have the Lions taking on the Cowboys in an absolutely epic matchup at Ford Field. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of fun with the trustometer. Okay, so we're going to figure out different trust elements and which side we trust more. So let's start with that quarterback conversation, Caroline, between Dak Prescott, obviously, and Jared Goff. Who do you trust more?
Ooh, Dak has been great the last couple of weeks. Jared Goff has not been great the last couple of weeks. Now, granted, I know one of those games where he looked truly dreadful when he had a QBR of 9. It was outdoors in the cold in the blustery wind in Philadelphia. That's not who Jared Goff is. That's an outlier to what his game really is. But I lean Dak. I think just because of exactly what, Cowboys fanboy 123 on Twitter said was we brought that tweet in is Dak is playing at an MVP caliber level. He had a clunker against Arizona, had a couple of consecutive clunkers, but overall in the season, Dak has been playing at an MVP caliber level. Now, I don't think he's still in the MVP race. I think the Cowboys have just lost too many games at this point right now, and it's a very crowded race at the top for MVP, but Dak is still good for one of those MVP caliber type of game. So I think it's Dak.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely Dak, and it's not even close. Look at the last 3 games,
Really?
Vegas, Philadelphia, and Kansas City. And if you look at that, his passer rating in those 3 games, 138, 103, and 100. If you look at his touchdown to interception ratio over the last 3 weeks, 8-1. So you're talking about completion percentages through the roof right now. Average per attempt is through the roof, meaning he is pushing the ball down the field. Of course, he has CD and George Pickens to push the ball too. But for me, just the way he's seeing the field right now is better than Goff. And yes, you are right. We have to put the context around outdoor cold weather. This game at Ford Field will not be any of those things. But, man, it's just Dak is cooking right now. So, all right, we both trust Dak more. So what about the weapons? Now, the latest on Amon-Ra St. Brown seems to be that they're trying to get him back into practice. It looks like there's a shot he will play. If he can practice, he will play. So he's a game-time decision per Dan Campbell. They're trying to get him on the field. So knowing that Amon-Ra St. Brown is a little questionable, which group of weapons do you trust more between the Cowboys and the Lions?
I'm going to do something that's probably not allowed, but give me the Cowboys receivers. Whatever Amon-Ra St. Brown's availability is, I would still take CD and George Pickens, who is wide receiver 2, or wide receiver 1, cosplaying as a 2. Like George Pickens would be a 1 on really any other team in the National Football League not named the Cincinnati Bengals or the Philadelphia Eagles. Correct me if I missed one. So I'll take the Cowboys receivers. I'll take the Lions running backs. I mean, give me Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery every single day and twice on Sundays. Defensively, I lean the Lions, but I think the gap between the Lions, my impression of the Lions defense and my impression of the Cowboys defense, like that gap has shrunk significantly over the last couple of weeks. Like versus what the conversation about these two defenses were a few months ago.
But when we stick on the weapons for a second here, you can't turducken the weapons. Like you can't turn around. Like
I just did.
No, you can't. You can't.
I just missed your potato-headed the weapons.
That is specifically not allowed because think about this is like when I go up at the Christmas, I go up to the Christmas buffet and somebody has one of those cakes that also has pie in it. No, I don't want a pie cake. I want cake, right? Like, so yeah, no, that's a thing. Look it up.
No, it's not. I've never seen that in my
pie cakes
life.
are a thing. Yeah, I watch a lot of food TV. Pie cakes are a
thing
thing now.
See, that's not allowed.
That's what you're doing. You're pie caking this thing. You can't take the question is weapons, which takes all of them, which is why Green Bay is clearly the better option here. You're right. George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb are the best. Green Bay. I don't know why I said Green Bay. I don't know why I have them on the mind. Detroit's the better option here. Suddenly I put the Packers in this conversation. Look, when you talk Jahmyr Gibbs and you talk David Montgomery, and then I'm going to presume that Amon-Ra gets into this game. I'm just going to make that presumption. Yeah, I'll take the weapons because, frankly, I don't think there's a player in the NFL scarier than Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, if I need one player to make one play to get me somewhere, I want the ball in Jahmyr Gibbs' hands above and beyond everybody else. Every one of the receivers we're in love with. I don't think there's anybody tougher to get down to the ground. I don't think there's anybody more explosive and anybody more capable of making chicken salad out of chicken, you know what, than Jahmyr Gibbs. So, just how great he is compared to everything else. I agree the wide receivers are better, but come on, you can't Mr. Potato Head this thing. Not allowed. Lions better. I'm the arbiter.
I'm gonna stick with my Frankenstein. My Frankenstein of weapons. Give me Lions running backs, Cowboys receivers, Lions defense. So I guess if I have to pick one, I go Lions, but I don't have to.
Wait. So you trust the Lions defense more than the Cowboys defense right now, even though the Cowboys defense has had a bit
Cowboys
of a
defense is much improved. Much
Okay.
improved. But also we have more of a sample size of what this Lions defense is. Look, we've seen this Cowboys defense beat the Chiefs and beat the Eagles, but also this Chiefs offense doesn't look as high powered as we know the Chiefs offense can be. And then stopping Philadelphia's offense is a much easier task this season than it was in their Super Bowl run. So I still kind of have questions about just how upgraded this Cowboys defense is. Understanding and stating that it is far upgraded with the addition of Quinnen Williams compared to what they were at the beginning of the season. I mean, that defense was a liability. That defense was an eyesore. That defense pissed me off with how good Dak Prescott was playing and how terrible that defense was. Now, this Cowboys defense is doing what I've asked it to do all season long, and that's not suck. Just play at a high enough level. That's exactly what they're doing. So they're doing what I've asked them to do. I just still defer slightly. That's why I say the gap between these two defenses has shrunk significantly. I just still defer slightly to that Lions defense.
I think you're right. The Lions defense, by the way, battered and bruised in the back end too. So they've been sort of a shell of themselves, which is just part of what seems to be the core of the Lions. Injuries on the defensive side of the ball are one of the few things you can count on. So, but I think I agree with you. How about this one? Which head coach do you trust more? Here's the funny thing. I was sure, even a few hours ago, as we were getting ready for the show, that my answer was Dan Campbell. And I have actually decided in the last couple of hours to change my answer. That's right. I am fully in. And here's the reason. Dan Campbell is so reckless with fourth down. That's part of his identity. I don't trust that this year. It's not working this year. When you look at Shedeur and the way he's made the most, like his calling card is offense. Which team has had the better offense this year? It's been the Cowboys. So to me, the coach that has made better usage of his calling card has actually been Shedeur. And like, look, I know none of us liked the hire coming out of the gates, and none of us really thought it was going to make a lot of sense. He's quietly managed to keep the Cowboys on the rails when this season could have easily gone the other way. I think Schottenheimer deserves a hell of a lot of credit for just the fact that he's been able to keep the Cowboys together. And then if I'm just like, I love Dan Campbell. I think Dan Campbell is one of the better coaches in the NFL. I don't trust Dan Campbell on fourth down in key situations because he just, I get it. It's our identity. We go for it. How many years is that going to kill you in the playoffs? So, look, at the end of the day, while I think Campbell's a really good coach, I don't trust fourth down decision-making. So I'm going with Shedeur. Shock in the world.
I'll give Brian Schottenheimer so much credit. When I saw Jerry Jones get up in that press conference and start crying about how great he is at identifying coaches, I was like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. Brian Schottenheimer, that's the best that you can do, Jerry Jones. Brian Schottenheimer. I was so turned off from the hire because I thought it was so much of Jerry Jones wanting to be top dog with the Cowboys that he was ignoring any other better coaching candidates. So I was very anti Brian Schottenheimer. I will give him so much credit that I have been so pleasantly surprised by this Cowboys team. And what's his calling card? Offense. The Cowboys have had one of the best offenses in the NFL this season. So I want to give Brian Schottenheimer his flowers. I still defer to Dan Campbell for a couple of reasons. One, we've seen him in these games, right? We've seen Dan Campbell make those decisions in the postseason in some of the biggest games of the season. And I think the thing with Dan Campbell is you have to ride the highs and the lows. I trust that Dan Campbell is going to do something wildly insane, and either it works and he looks like a genius, or it doesn't and he looks like a buffoon. But I at least know what to expect from Dan Campbell. And I trust him in those positions, whether you agree, whether you think it's right, wrong, or indifferent. So I think I defer to Dan Campbell just because we have more of a sample size of him in these have-to-have-it high-level games. Which
All
is
right, so
this is
then
what it is for the Lions and the
Yeah.
Cowboys. This is a must-win game.
So with that being said, which team do you think you can trust more to find their way into the postseason?
Playoffs.
The Cowboys have been so much more consistent recently. And that is, I think, such a big part of a postseason run or finding yourself in the postseason is getting hot at the right time. It's exactly what the Cowboys are doing. I told the Cowboys after they beat the Raiders, I was like, okay, now do it against the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Lions. Well, they've done it against 2 out of those 3, and I wouldn't be shocked if they did it against the Lions again. But I think the Lions are going to win this weekend. And the only basis that I have on that is, isn't everything in the NFL expect the unexpected? Isn't what we've learned from both of these teams and so many other teams that are contending, the Packers, the Bills, the Bucks, when they zig, they zag, when they zag, they zig. When you expect a certain thing from them, you get something totally and completely different. I think the Cowboys have been playing so well as of late. I think the Lions have kind of faltered off a little bit, whether that's the cold, whether that's injuries, whatever it might be. I expect this to kind of be a flip-flop kind of game where the last couple of weeks we've grown so accustomed to expect a certain thing from either of these two teams that we get something different this week.
So for me, this all comes down to the fact that if you look at the standings right now, San Francisco would be the 7th seed in the playoffs, and they're 9-4, unbelievably. So I think it's going to take at least 11 wins, 11-6, maybe even 12-5 to make the playoffs, even as a wild card. So what's that mean? That means whichever one of these teams we're talking about is going to have to win out to make the playoffs. Cannot take a single additional loss, in my opinion, to make the playoffs. If I look at the Lions, they got this game, then they have the Rams, and they finish the season with the Bears. They have 3 tough games left. If I look instead at the Cowboys' standpoint from all of this, the Cowboys' schedule, way easier. The Cowboys looking ahead, they have this game, obviously, but then they have the Vikings, who have no quarterback solution, the Chargers, who are beat to hell, the Commanders, who also don't have a quarterback, and the Giants, who have given up on everything. I think if the Cowboys win this game on Thursday night, the Cowboys win out.
They're in.
And I think that's a real possibility. And I'm picking the Cowboys to win. So I think the Cowboys win Thursday night over the Lions, and as a result, the Cowboys are going to win their way into the playoffs.
I think with the schedules that you just listed, there is a certain sense of we absolutely positively have to win this game because we have no gimmies left in our schedule for the Lions. For the Cowboys, I said after the Raiders game, we can go back and play the tape. I said if you beat 2 out of the 3 of the Chiefs, Eagles, and Lions, and then win out against the rinky-dinks on your schedule, I think the Cowboys can be in. I still think even if the Cowboys lose this game against the Lions and they win out on the rest of their schedule, there is still a legitimate path for the Cowboys. I don't know if that same sense of urgency exists for the Cowboys than it does for the Lions just because of the upcoming schedule. That's not going to be the message inside the locker room. Like, obviously, their sense of urgency is going to be there every single week, and the Cowboys are going to feel that sense of urgency to win this game. But just looking at the upcoming schedules, it is much more of a must-win, in my opinion, for the Lions than it is the Cowboys.
All right, from the Lions and Cowboys to the rest of the NFL, we're going to figure out what teams are actually headed to the playoffs. What teams sitting in the fringe are going to get into the club in January? We'll tell you next. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. That amazing picture is me just jacked up, being security, deciding who gets led in the club because it's time to figure out
Security.
what teams out there are going to get into the playoff club. There's a lot to unpack here, Caroline, not the least of which in that picture is the fact that you've already got the Patriots and the Rams over in the side in the club. They're just hanging out
Look
like
at them.
Drake May and Stafford.
Sharing a
Like they're
pint.
already inside. Oh, man, they're living the life, and everybody else is standing outside in the cold. Like Mahomes not even in a jersey. I don't know how we feel about this.
Yeah, and look at Bryce Young. Why is he so tiny?
Well,
Maybe this
Bryce
is to scale. Bryce
No,
is
I mean,
tiny,
it's-
but he's standing there like Mahomes looks pissed that he has to wait in line for the club. He's not accustomed to waiting in line for the club. But Bryce Young is just excited to be there. He's looking around like, look, guys, look, this is so fun. We're getting into Club January. It's the hottest
Bryce
club
is-
in the NFL. It beats
Bryce
Club
is
Cancun.
me at every after party. He's like, "Come on, I want to get in, guys." All right, so let's
Let
take
me
a
in,
look
let
at
me
these teams.
in.
We'll go one at a time. We'll figure out if they're making it into the club, and we'll start with the Cowboys. We were just talking about the Dallas Cowboys. I've given you the path. I think the Cowboys are going to win all of their remaining games. That is right. The Cowboys go from 6-5-1 to finish this season 11-5-1. Which, by the way, means that tie becomes absolutely massive, which you know I like because I troll the world about that result. So all of a sudden, I got them in the club. But here's the thing. They're in the club, but everybody's sort of keeping a close eye because they came into the club. They asked for bottle service. We're not really sure they deserve bottle service. They think everything's going to be comped because they're the Cowboys. Everybody's going to be talking about them. Like it's the whole – they're there. Their reputation might be a little bit too big for the club, but we'll let them in.
I'm letting him into Club January. I am, because I just said I think that even if the Cowboys lose to the Lions and they went out the rest of their schedule, that's enough for the Cowboys to find themselves in the playoffs, even in an incredibly bloated, NFC. So I think the Cowboys find themselves in. And like you said, they're going to come in, they're going to act like they own the place. They're going to say bottle service. And then the Rams are going to be like, yeah, that's cute and all, but we're going to get a better bottle service and we're going to have cooler people at our table. So they definitely don't run the club. Even if they think they're the coolest kids in the club, they don't run it. But I think at this point, they're just happy to be there. So they find themselves in Club January, but maybe it's a short-lived, time in the club.
I don't know. I think Jerry Jones is sort of the worst thing when you go to a club, like when you've got somebody that's not that popular that doesn't really, but their publicist is still running around and be like, take pictures, say, we're in the club. That's going to be Jerry Jones the whole time. Media circuit just telling us all they're in the club. What about one other team? We'll pull the picture up again, show you another team that is in line waiting to get into Club January. How about the Chicago Bears? Are you letting the Bears into the club? Look at their remaining schedule. 2 games against the Packers, a game against the 49ers, a game against the Lions. You want to talk about a gauntlet? I didn't mention the Browns, sorry. But you want to talk about a gauntlet. Like, they got a lot in front of them. They getting in?
They've got a lot in front of them, but I'm putting them in the club. Chicago Bears, welcome in. That velvet rope has now been lifted. Caleb Williams, enjoy your time in Club January. It is fascinating, though. I was looking through several different NFL playoff simulators because that's what I do in my free time. But the Bears have in the top 7 in the NFC. So if the playoffs ended today, the teams that would currently be in the playoffs, the Bears have the lowest percentage chance of finding themselves in the postseason. They're hovering right around 71%, which is fascinating that the current number 1 seed in the NFC has the lowest percentage chance of teams that would be in right now in the postseason of getting into the postseason. Those games against the Packers, those games are absolutely, positively everything for the Chicago Bears. But after they beat the Eagles, I was very hesitant about this Bears team. They didn't just beat the Eagles, they absolutely positively clobbered the Eagles, and the final score doesn't even indicate how much of a beatdown it really was. So if the Bears can do that to the Eagles, why not the Bears? Why can't they sweep the Packers? Why not the Chicago Bears? So I'm letting them in.
I'm letting the Bears in, too, because I think they've got such a head start. They'll find enough wins left on the schedule. But I will say this. As you were talking about, I'm thinking about, like, anytime there's been, like, a one-hit wonder, somebody in pop culture that's, like, out there for a minute, and they think for that minute, boy, they're out there, and it's like, yeah, I get into the club. Like, that's fine. I'm not sure that I'm long-term making a plan to have the Bears back in the club every year. This year has been a wild – and look, better to be lucky than good. And this has been a really fun season for the Bears. So I want to make it clear, Chicago fans, I am jealous that you get to watch such meaningful football. It's incredible and it's fun, and everybody that loves watching the NFL loves it when the Bears are good. Like, this is just a great story. But I don't think that I'm necessarily like reserving an annual booth every year for them to come back. This feels like sort of the Gangnam Style moment. Like, they're going to have a moment, but I'm not sure I'm ready to just call them a permanent member of the club. I'm not sure why I went Gangnam
I don't know.
Style
Why
with that
not,
either.
though?
No, well,
I said no, but
because
then now I'm checking myself. Like,
it's
they're
just
young.
been such a weird year. It's such a weird year. Just like this, just like last year with the Commanders, it was like, man, you don't usually win games this way. And now this year they've taken a step back. I think the Bears are pretty good. I think their record is better than they are because they've been able to get away with some things. But at the same time, who cares? You're winning football games. So, like, who gives a damn? But to that point, like, if we have to, like, I have a sneaking suspicion next year when we see all the advanced analytics and all the articles that come out that say teams that will take a step back. You can clip this off now, save it then, replay it. The Bears will be on every one of those lists because of some of the metrics. All right. What about the Panthers? The Carolina Panthers in your backyard. The Carolina Panthers have gone up to the club bouncer and they've said, hey, Caroline Fenton sent us. Can we get in the club? Are you allowing it to happen?
No, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm not. Maybe like we'll just keep pounding and maybe you'll find yourself there next year. It's just those 2 games against the Bucks upcoming, like the Bears, those games are everything. But with a playoff spot on the line, with the division on the line, with Mike Evans reportedly getting healthier and eyeing a return for the Bucks, if you tell me, okay, you got to win 2 games, are you trusting Bryce Young or are you trusting Baker Mayfield? I'm taking Baker Mayfield. So it's been so fun to watch the Panthers this season, the steps they've taken, because I didn't expect the Panthers to really be relevant at all. Now it's December 3rd. We're talking about the Panthers and their playoff push. Like, there's a path for the Panthers right now, but I have to defer to the Buccaneers. They've been my team of destiny. They're getting healthier. They've suffered injury setbacks. I think overall, though, I have to trust the Bucs a little bit more than I trust the Panthers. And the Panthers, I don't think have a record good enough. They definitely don't have a record good enough to find themselves in a wild card position.
Caroline, there's nothing more humbling when you're young and you're at the clubbing age than when you go to the club and you get to the front and there's no reason they can't let you in. They're just not letting you in until they see who else shows up. They're just like, hey, yeah, give it a minute. Like, they're waiting to see if they can get a cooler kid in. That's what's happening to Carolina. I don't think they're in the club because of Tampa Bay, but this is one of those moments where, like, I don't really trust Tampa Bay. So if I'm the bouncer, I'm sitting there, I'm like, you're going to have to wait 30 minutes. I want to see if Baker shows up. If Baker doesn't show up, we'll let you in. But if Baker shows up, sorry, man. And, like, you can't do anything about it. You just got to stand there and watch your clock and act like you don't feel like an idiot while you wait for your opportunity. That being said, you are right. They are 7-6, and you look at what's left in their schedule, and you say, man, like, I think that Seattle game is going to be tough because they have so much to play for. Even if the Seattle game's tough and they split with Tampa Bay, it just puts them in a really tough situation. So this has been a really up and down Panthers team. 1 week they're great, the next week they're not. So, hell, I don't even know if they're going to show up against the Saints. I like them. I don't trust them in the club, and I'd rather see if Baker can make it in the club, so I'm making them wait at the ropes. Let's what about?
But it's exhilarating sometimes to be denied from the club. It can be,
or to be at the front.
Because if you're denied from the club, if you're denied from the club, that means that you're in consideration to be in the club. So you'll take what you can get. A win is a win.
Yeah, you're just like, but I dressed nice. All right. What about the?
But I wear my cute shoes.
Are the Texans getting into club January? At this point, 7-5. The Texans have the Chiefs, then the Cardinals, the Raiders, the Chargers, then the Colts. Are we putting the Texans in the club?
The Texans are the team that's waiting in line at the club when you're like, no, we're not letting them in. They're not cool enough. They're not hot enough. No. And then the end of the night is dwindling down and, people start to clear out and you're like, oh, shoot, like we need people in this club. Like, oh, fine. They're not the hottest guys in line. They're not the coolest guys in line. They're not going to buy the most expensive bottle service, but like, dang it, like they're in the club regardless. I do think we find the Texans in Club January, and it has so much to do with the upcoming schedules of Houston in Indianapolis, and the Jags. Also the Jags in that conversation as well. The Colts have an absolute gauntlet upcoming on their schedule. The Texans have a bunch of rinky dinks. And if CJ Stroud can just do enough to not blow these games, the Texans defense is good enough that they can pick up enough of the slack. Daniel Jones is injured. They have tough games upcoming. I don't think it's crazy to see a reality where the Colts actually end up missing the playoffs altogether, and we see both the Jags and the Texans in the postseason.
Well, first and foremost, I'm too pot committed on my Colts states all year to jump ship now. But
yeah, you dug in on that one.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm done. That's it. So I've got the Colts making it because otherwise I've got way too much humble pie to eat. Here's the thing: the Texans are like a group of guys, and again, I'll speak to life experience. If you are just a group of guys, even if you're a group of popular guys, even if you're a group of good-looking guys, even if you've got everything together, even if you're a group of rich guys, you walk up to the club and you don't have any girls with you, sometimes you can't get in. CJ Stroud is a pretty girl that everybody wants if you're going to get in the playoffs. If you're going to make it into the club, you better get something out of your quarterback. The offense has just got to be better. And I'm not putting it on CJ Stroud. I think there's a lot of elements around CJ Stroud that just need to be better. I just don't trust the Texans offense. I want to trust the Texans offense because, frankly, I think the Texans would be a great story. Like, give me the AFC South with 3 teams in the club in January. None of us saw that coming. I think that's electric to me. Give me the opportunity to see this defense take on electric teams. Like, give me great playoff games with that defense on the field. But, man, I do not trust down by a score, 3rd and 7, where are you generating the offense from? I just don't see that answer for the Texans. So for that reason, even though, boy, they're a group of popular dudes, and even though they're rich and they got everything going for them, man, they're standing outside the velvet ropes, and the bounce is like, nah, man, there's too many guys in the club already. That's what's happening. Texans are left out.
You were cooler 2 years ago.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you're like, man, I'm better now. They're like, no, 2 years ago you had a pretty girl with you. Then you got in the club. The Chiefs have one of the prettiest girls of all with Patrick Mahomes. It's a weird analogy, weird transition. Are we letting the Chiefs in the club? They've got the Texans left, and then the Chargers, the Titans, the Raiders. They do have the Broncos. So the Chiefs have 2 tough games remaining on their schedule. They getting in the club?
I mean, I could even see it being a possibility that the Chiefs lose to the Texans, the Chargers, and the Broncos. And that would be ultimate chaos panic scenario in Kansas City. But as much as I want to just stick a fork in Kansas City and call them done, I can't. I can't do that. They've earned that level of benefit of the doubt. They've acquired that equity in my brain to continue to give them the benefit of the doubt. So, like, I don't want to let them into the club. It's like if the Backstreet Boys come to the club, it's like they used to be so cool. Like, they're kind of chuggy now. They're old now, but like we have to let them in because they used to be so good. Like, that's kind of how I see the Chiefs. Like, I don't know how much I truly believe in this version of the Chiefs team, but I believe in them enough and what we've seen from the Chiefs enough and Patrick Mahomes enough and Andy Reid enough to say, I think they're going to be able to figure it out enough to squeak themselves in. But I'm saying that with a lot of apprehension.
So I'm torn because originally my thought was very similar to yours. I'm imagining me standing at the ropes. It's late. I mean, it is late in the evening. The amount of people coming in now is shut off. Like, nobody knew was coming into the club. And then all of a sudden, Mahomes, Kelsey, and Andy Reid walk up, and I'm like, nah, I kind of want him in my club. Like, I want to put him in. That's what we do every year. But this is we are finally at the spot where I'm looking around. I'm like, you know what, man? No, it's too late. You're not going to spend enough money. You're not going to make it far enough to make it worth it. We're not letting you in this time. Now, that's going to get me fired as a bouncer. That's my fear. I'm going to be the bouncer that keeps the Chiefs out of the playoffs. At some point, somebody's got to be first to do it. So what the hell? Let it be me. Let it be now. I'm out. They've just run out of runway, and I don't trust when you start talking about the teams they have to take on. That Texans defense is electric. They're taking on 2 of the best defenses in all of football over the course of the last 6 weeks, and I don't trust their offense to be able to score. So, man, it doesn't make any sense to not let Kelsey, Mahomes, and Andy Reid, like, in a real world. We're sitting outside of, Live in Vegas, and I've got the velvet rope behind me. I'm going to be the idiot that turns away Mahomes, Reid, and Travis Kelsey. But I'll admit it, I think they've run out of runway. They've run out of runway. We've run out of excuses. So, to me, I've got to leave them out of the club. All right, you know what? There's
The
one
Chiefs
thing
are
that we
going to
have
Club Cancun, significantly less cool club.
I don't
There's
know.
a
Like the
beach.
fact, I mean, I have a sneaking suspicion that, I'll regret leaving the Chiefs out of the club. But, the great thing is social media will remind me of it forever. Okay, we'll keep figuring it out. In the meantime, we're going to get back to some of what you need to see from some of the other matchups happening this weekend, not the least of which is a matchup of two of the biggest names that were drafted this April. Shedeur versus Cam. What do we really make of it? Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz. Breaking news. Sources. Ohio State offensive coordinator Brian Hartline is expected to become the next coach at South Florida. He's OSU's play caller and built a reputation as the country's top developer of wide receivers. Caroline, this is a big get for USF, obviously. This is a big loss for Ohio State, obviously. I will say he's been developing some of the best wide receiver rooms we've ever seen. They've also been consistently recruiting some of the most talented wide receivers we've ever seen. So it'll be interesting to see if that line can continue somewhere not named Ohio State.
Yeah, and we've seen great Ohio State receivers pretty much in the entire existence of its football program. It's not unique to Brian Hartline, but Brian Hartline has proven. I mean, Ohio State is a top 20 total offense in the country. You talk about receivers, but a big part of that is also the development of quarterbacks. I mean, we've seen Julian Sayin in his first year as a starter in college football. He's a legitimate Heisman Trophy contender and has only gotten better week over week over week throughout the season. The difficult thing, though, is for Ryan Day. It's the double-edged sword of being a dominant football team. The positive side is you win games and you win championships. The downside to that, though, is your assistants get hired elsewhere. So now Ryan Day, for the third year in a row, is going to be tasked to find a new offensive coordinator. Obviously, Chip Kelly coordinated the offense in the national championship year. He left to go to the Raiders. We saw how that turned out. Not so great. Now Brian Hartline is leaving to go to South Florida. But this is a great opportunity for Brian Hartline to get a head job. We saw South Florida catapult Alex Golesh, their former head coach, now the head coach at Auburn. That's a massive leap. So I think Brian Hartline's kind of looking at it and saying, hey, look, if I can find success here at a group of five team that has national attention, that can elevate me to one of the best jobs in the country. And that's kind of how I view Auburn. The difficult thing, though, is in South Florida, or at South Florida, you're competing for talent with Florida State, Miami, and it's a talent-rich state. It's one of the best recruiting states in America, don't get me wrong, but he's going to have his work ahead of him in terms of recruiting.
This is also a big reminder that for coaches that are trying to find their footing as head coaches, as much as for years we've sat there and said, oh, you want a big name job, sometimes the best thing to do rather than go to a mid of the power fours, rather than go to a Michigan State sort of program where you're going to have to try and win against all of that to rise yourself as a coach. You're better off going to a school like South Florida where you can turn around, you can beat up on that level of competition, and then you can use that to rise to wherever you want to be.
I think this is also has fascinating implications for Penn State. We learned a couple of days ago that Kalani Sitake, the head coach at BYU, was going to be the focus of Penn State's coaching search. Kalani Sitake said, no, I'm going to stay at BYU. I wondered if Brian Hartline would be in consideration for the Penn State job. If he takes the South Florida job, that kind of tells me that maybe he wasn't in consideration for Penn State, or at least saw South Florida as a better opportunity than Penn State. And if that's the case, that's a huge gut punch to Penn State. So Penn State moved on from James Franklin, who has brought a ton of talent to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech now has a top 50 recruiting class. Early signing day is happening. I believe it's tomorrow. So Penn State is left coachless. Penn State's kind of been left into the cold in this coaching search. And look, it's getting late early in the recruiting cycle and in the transfer portal cycle. So it's fascinating now that Brian Hartline is off of the hot board, so to speak, in coaching searches. Where does Penn State go now?
That is going to be the question we will wait for an answer for as long as it takes. In the meantime, let's get to one of the games we got this weekend with two of the biggest names from last year's draft. A little tail of the tape here. We've got Shedeur taking on Cam Ward. And if you look at this, Shedeur obviously picked 144 with only 2 starts, but the completion percentage, 60%, passing yards per game, close, offensive points per game. The advantage goes there. Like, look, I think it's important to sit here and acknowledge that Cam Ward has had absolutely nothing around him. But the question is, which team more regrets their first round or their quarterback selected in the draft, I should say? Number 1 overall pick, Cam Ward, or 5th round quarterback, Shedeur Sanders?
I can't say that either of these teams really regret. I can't say the Titans regret taking Cam Ward number 1 overall, because I think any team that had the number 1 overall pick likely would have taken Cam Ward, at least a quarterback needy team, because of course Travis Hunter was in the conversation. Abdul Carter was in the conversation before the surgery. I don't think the Titans regret it. I also don't think that the Titans' number 1 issue is Cam Ward. I don't think the Titans' number 11 issue is Cam Ward. The Titans are so flawed all the way down to the foundation. They have an ownership issue. They have, a very, mucky, muddy perspective of who is actually running stuff. Is it the general manager? Is it, who's calling the shots in Tennessee? I think that's an issue that Tennessee has. They have so many roster holes. They don't know who their next head coach is going to be. So I don't think the Titans can say that they regret drafting Cam Ward because he's not the problem. So I lean the Browns because I think the Browns may regret spending 2 picks in this past year's draft on quarterbacks. And we don't even know if either of them are going to be the solution moving forward.
Now, I think the hard part I don't disagree with that. But if you throw a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick at a quarterback and you miss, it's not ideal, but you tried. The problem for the Titans is that they are positioned to have the 1st overall pick again this year. Now, this is where Titans fans are very excited because they're convinced that somebody will trade a king's ransom to move up to 1 to get Mendoza or whatever quarterback shakes out to be the number 1 because they don't need a quarterback. And I see that. But the question you're going to have to ask yourself for the next decade is Cam Ward better than Fernando Mendoza? Because ultimately, what happened last year is one of the most dangerous things that can happen in all of football to me. We're desperate for a quarterback, and this guy's the best one available, so we'll take him. I understand that, but I don't think you can take a quarterback 1st overall, 2nd overall, 5th overall. I don't think you could take a quarterback in the top of the 1st round unless you truly believe that guy is going to be able to feed your family for the rest of your career. You got to believe in that guy so much that you believe that guy can turn out to be a Drake May. You believe that guy can turn out to be a Jaden Daniels, or you believe that guy can turn out to be a Caleb Williams. Now, you're not wrong. If you look across the board, as we've talked about ad nauseum, quarterbacks taken that high are failed by their teams all the time. Trevor Lawrence is a great example of that. We're not sure yet whether or not Bryce Young is going to work out to be a long-term answer. You can go up and down the list at the amount of misses with the number 1 overall pick. And certainly, we don't know yet if Cam Ward is a miss. But to me, that's also kind of the problem. We don't know yet. So now the Titans go into this year's draft with the number 1 overall pick, likely, if things play out this way. And then they're going to have to make a decision. Are they sticking with Cam Ward? I think they're sticking with Cam Ward. That's probably what you have to do. But what if, at the end of the day, a new coach comes in, a new staff comes in, and they just believe one of this year's quarterbacks are better? Will they have the autonomy to be able to look at that quarterback? So these are the long-term decisions that come when you get a guy and then you're not sure if he is the guy. So, frankly, I've said since the day Cam Ward was drafted, I did not believe that the Titans would take advantage of him, and I thought that they would likely ruin a kid. And I think he could have been a really good starting quarterback in the right system with the right pieces around him. They just never have done that. So which quarterback do you think this year is more likely to go on a run and finish the season on a high note?
I think it's Shedeur. Shedeur has better pieces around him. Shedeur has more talent around him, the young talent that we've seen emerging in Cleveland. Obviously, you have the best defensive player on the planet, and Myles Garrett, who will be the defensive player of the year. I think with just that alone, with Myles Garrett and a couple of pieces offensively, like that's enough for the Browns to piece together something that can at least give you a little bit of hope. There's no hope in Tennessee. Where is Cam Ward going? Where is Cam Ward throwing the ball? What is the bright spot on the Titans roster? Genuinely, like, please someone point to me outside of Cam Ward, the bright spot on the Titans roster, the bright spot in the Titans organization as a whole. So I think it's Shedeur, and really, this isn't a knock on Shedeur and this isn't a knock on Cam Ward. I think it's Shedeur, not because of Shedeur, but because of all of the pieces around him. Because I think Shedeur has a competent head coach in Kevin Stefanski, a very well respected head coach in Kevin Stefanski. So it's the infrastructure around these young quarterbacks that makes me say Shedeur, and say Shedeur really confidently.
I don't disagree, but I think this is more about my lack of confidence in the Titans than it is my actual confidence in the Browns. I listened to a great breakdown yesterday. Rich Gannon did a beautiful job of explaining from the play calling that's happening in Cleveland why it's a clear indication that Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland staff do not trust to put the ball in Shedeur's hands. And when you hear it from a guy that played at that level, and he's talking about the play calling and the way that they're essentially saving Shedeur, I just don't know that the Browns are really going to let him open up this year. Now, maybe it's a little like Jaden last year where it just takes a few weeks and then they start to give him more chances down the field. I just don't know. So at some point for me, it's going to be, will either team really put that quarterback in a situation to succeed? And then what do you do? Like, if you're the Browns, you're likely to have a top 5 pick in next year's draft. So certainly you could just press reset if you want. They may be pressing reset at the head coach position for all we know. So maybe an entire new regime comes in and just makes an entire new statement at the quarterback position. That's easy to do. I genuinely don't know. And when you look at what the Titans have in front of them schedule-wise, over the course of the next few weeks, Cam Ward is going to have to take on the Browns, at the 49ers, then the Chiefs, then the Saints, who are terrible, and then again take on the Jags, who just kicked the snot out of him. Like, I think there's a chance that we see regression of Cam Ward. And then, like, Caroline, I just don't know what you do if you're the Titans organization and you're looking around and saying, well, we suck everywhere. Like, maybe you just make it simple, best player available. Maybe you trade down and you hope that you can get more out of this quarterback. But I guess I struggle to find a time. For all the doubt that there was for Caleb Williams, at the end of 1 year, there was, well, he's got to improve some things. There was never I'm not sure this guy's even a capable starter in this league. There are people that have been watching the Cam Ward tape, all of it, not just select throws, all of the tape, that say, man, I'm not even sure if he's a capable starter. So I don't remember the last time a team picked first and was back in this situation.
I mean, we've seen the Browns do it several times. We've seen the Jags do it several times. Both of those organizations have had the number 1 overall pick in back-to-back years. I think you have to, if you're the Titans, you have to let this next head coach evaluate Cam and say if I can work with that or not. And if he says, yes, give me an opportunity to work with Cam, and it doesn't work, well, then more than likely, you're probably going to be right back into the conversation and to having a top 3 pick and drafting your quarterback of the future. If they do decide to draft a quarterback in this year's draft, then you say, okay, we're going to trade Cam Ward because we just don't believe in Cam Ward. If you want to run it back with Cam Ward, you trade the number 1 overall pick, because there are plenty of quarterback needy teams that would be salivating at the opportunity to draft a Fernando Mendoza, for example. And the Titans need draft capital. The Titans need that kind of draft equity to, they can say, hey, we want your next 2 first-round picks. I think that would be a great opportunity for the Titans, because this is going to be a long several-year rebuild. This is not something for the Titans that's just going to snap your fingers, happen overnight. This is going to be a 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 year kind of building process before we can even talk about the Titans being in consideration for making a run in the postseason. I think the best path forward, if a coach says, I can work with Cam Ward, is trading back, getting a couple of picks, and continuing to build over the next couple of years.
Yeah, keep an eye on that Titans-Saints game in a few weeks that nobody wants to keep an eye on, because the Titans play the Saints and the Giants play the Raiders in a few weeks. And those are 2 games that will absolutely impact the entire race at the top of the draft and who gets quarterback. Who wins this game? But I got Cleveland big in this game. Who do you think wins?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll say Cleveland big, because that would imply that Cleveland has to score points. I do think Cleveland wins this game, though. I think the Titans are in the category of bad, where they can't even take advantage of bad teams. I'd probably put the Saints in that category as well, that they just can't even, they're so bad they can't even take advantage of playing bad teams. I think the Browns are just a notch above, just given the fact that they have Myles Garrett and you don't. So I think that the Browns are bad, but not so bad that they can't even take advantage of playing the Titans. So I'll take the Browns.
I'm just trying to figure out what there's more of: Myles Garrett sacks or interceptions of Cam Ward in this game. I think the Browns going to roll. All right, huge news today in the form of CP3 Plus. We had injury news on Zion. Kelly Eco going to join the show next. We'll break it all down. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. The Clippers are parting ways with Chris Paul. The big news that we've had this morning: CP3 signed with LA this summer for his 21st and final NBA season. Has only averaged about 14 minutes per game with the Clippers. We're going to break it down now with Kelly Eco joining us, Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz on the show. Kelly, let's just start with a bit. I feel like I spent this morning trashing Chris Paul. Not at all my intent, but like the current iteration of Chris Paul is not a difference maker for the Clippers. So how big of a deal is this to you?
It's a big deal because of the name Chris Paul, but in actuality, the Clippers have been a mess this season. It's not really a surprise. Over the summer, whenever he came back to Los Angeles, this was supposed to be a beautiful homecoming, the place where he's from. well, the place where he calls home, and joining an older, experienced Clipper team, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, adding John Collins, Brook Lopez. This was supposed to be the beginning of something great for the Clippers. One last shot, if you will, at chasing a title. But as you can see this season, the injuries, inconsistencies, the offensive efficiency has been way down. This is just a bad team. So Chris Paul's only averaging like 14, 15 minutes a game, and he looked a shell of himself, this season. So he should have retired maybe a couple seasons ago, if you wanted to be honest. But I think them officially parting ways is the beginning of the fragmentation of this team.
Yeah, that's what we said. That is just the first of many dominoes to fall. The Clippers have
Yeah.
much bigger fish to fry. But when we look at Chris Paul, he will be eligible to be traded on December 15th. Will he be traded? And what landing spot makes sense for him at this point in his career?
I mean, if you're going to look at the NBA market and see what teams could use a point guard, honestly, the Houston Rockets make a lot of sense, because if Fred's not going to come back anytime soon, they still need some guard depth on the rotation. You could look at a team like Minnesota that's looking for a point guard as well. You could look at a team like Charlotte that's looking for some point guard upgrades as well. But I think the best thing for Chris Paul is just to stay at home. I think it's clear that he's still a talented NBA player, because this is Chris Paul and everything he's done up until this point in his career. But in actuality, is he going to be a difference maker on a title team at this point of his career? I don't think so. So if he wants to just still continue to be in the NBA locker rooms and continue to mentor young players, there's still a role for him. I think he's one of the smartest players to ever touch a basketball in the history of this game. But as far as impacting basketball at a high level, I think those days are long gone.
So you said this is just the beginning. What's next? Like somebody like Harden, what kind of value does he have around the league?
So I know the Minnesota Timberwolves are one team that has checked in on James Harden. If you look at a guy at age 36, averaging 26, 7, and 6, at that high level of production for that age is remarkable. So you understand why, teams would be checking in on him, especially with the Clippers situation right now. The problem is that the Clippers at this stage, from what I understand, if they're going to break this thing down, they need a ton of draft picks. I'm not sure how many picks James Harden is going to fetch right now at 36 on the market, even at the high level he's playing. So he's someone that I think teams will continue to monitor, because the Clippers are where they are in the standings, and he is still an all-star level type talent. But in terms of their actual return, I'm not sure if he's actually worth on the market what the Clippers would like to get if they choose to move on from him.
Look, I hear you. They need picks. The Clippers need picks desperately, especially
Right.
when, not if, but when they tear everything down. Do you think there is a level of hesitation or pause, though, the Clippers might have to acquire those picks, in fear of those picks being taken away for, the aspiration of it all?
That's a good point. That is a very good point. That's kind of like the overhead cloud that's looming over this franchise this season. People thought that if the Clippers started fast, that kind of stuff might go away, in terms of like it wouldn't be much of a distraction. But the worse that they've become, the more that their off-court issues have come to the surface. So any move that the Clippers want to make between now and the trade deadline, it has to be scrutinized through that lens, because that's still a thing that they have to address at some point. The league has to finish that investigation. Adam Silver has a lot to deal with in terms of that. So that's going to be hanging over their head until all this is done.
All right, Kelly, let's look at some of the non-Clipper news right now. Zion out indefinitely with the right adductor strain. It just feels like it's one thing after another. At this point, are we ready to call him the biggest bust in NBA history?
I think it's up there. I think, especially if you go back to NBA history and you look at the number of players that have signed $200 million deals, I don't think any other player has ever had the amount of non-guaranteed money that Zion does. And that just stems from a lack of trust. Like, he has to play a certain percentage of games played to get that money. He has to have a certain weight to get that money. He's only played like 224 games in 7 years. That's not even a 40-game average. It's not even a 30-game average. Like, we're talking about a guy that's never available. And I think right now it's best if both parties just part ways. The Pelicans are bad, but if you look at developing their queen, look at developing Jeremiah Fears, You could even throw Sadiq Bey in it. There are still things to like about this team moving forward. But Zion, if he's your most attractive asset at 25, maybe you can still get something back for him. I'm not saying it's going to be a wholesale return, but if you can get 50 cents on the dollar at this point, just cut your losses. Or I wouldn't be surprised in the summer if they just outright waive him and just start fresh, because this has to end at some point. This is a toxic situation. He's never available. When he is, the attitude isn't great. It's just not going to work out long term. So if there's a way to cut ties, they should do it immediately.
Man, it does not feel that long ago that at Pelicans HQ, they were throwing papers up in the air and cheering and celebrating over winning the draft lottery for the opportunity to draft Zion. And now here we are talking about the biggest bust in NBA history. It's brutal for the Pelicans. But another young star that's also limited is LaMelo Ball. Now, you reported a couple of weeks ago about his future with the Charlotte Hornets. What is the latest on LaMelo's future? Is it in Charlotte?
I think it's a wait and see right now. I think they're 2-8 in the last 10 games. Head coach Charles Lee has talked about, he's actually praised LaMelo for the attitude in terms of returning from a minutes restriction. The problem is that he's just not shooting the ball well at all. He's been benched a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. The offensive plan that Charles Lee has in place, on paper, it actually looks fantastic with off-ball screens, delay actions for LaMelo, having him use the ball less. The problem is, if he's not shooting the ball at a league average clip, there's no way this team can win games. And as a playmaker, he's still, among the best of the best. I think he's averaging like 45% of his teammates' assists. And I think the pick and roll chemistry with Kalkbrenner isn't as great as the one with Diabate. The moving pieces that they have, everything funnels back to LaMelo Ball. And if he's shooting less than 30% from three, less than 45% from two, it's really hard to put together a winning program. So the frustration is only going to mount, as long as this keeps happening. So it's going to be a wait and see.
All right, we're gonna figure out how to solve the entire NBA here. Kelly Blue Book is what you that's what you look at when you want to trade a car, right? When you want to know whether or not to trade, make a trade in the NBA, you consult the Kelly Eco Blue Book. That's what we're going to do here. So we'll go through. We're going to give you some names, and you figure out if it's time to trade them or to keep driving. All right, we're just trading or waiting. That's what we're going to do. Let's start with somebody we debate a lot on this show behind the scenes. Ja Morant. Trade him or keep driving?
Trade him. The Grizzlies are clearly moving in a new direction under Isalo. You're seeing Cedric Coward building around Zach Edey, building around Jalen Wells, Vince Williams Jr., operating as a de facto point guard. It doesn't look that bad. And Ja Morant is such a unique talent that if a system isn't entirely devoted to him and his skill set, it's kind of hard to see how both sides can move forward. So he's still at the age where if you trade him, you can get, maybe 2 first-round picks, maybe some young players come in the mix, and you can really help this Grizzlies team, because they're only they're like 3 games below 500 in the West. That's still pretty good considering what they've had to endure this season. So if you can get some picks for him, some players, cash them in.
Now, look, you said it. He's a special talent because he is. He is a star in this league. But trading for Ja Morant also understands trading for the extracurriculars that come with Ja Morant. So what's a landing spot that makes sense for Ja?
Ironically, I thought it was going to be New Orleans. Earlier in the season, I thought pairing him with what I thought was going to be a healthy Zion, because he played like 10 games this season. I thought that was going to be something. But I would look at Minnesota. Like, if you want to have him a new start, a new lease of life, playing with Anthony Edwards, playing in a free-flowing system, playing for a head coach that's going to empower you, I think that would be a fantastic spot for Ja Morant. Now, going back to what you said about the extracurriculars, not sure if you can do that in Minnesota. If anybody's been to Minnesota, I'm not sure if that's the place for extracurriculars. So I think you'd be just fine over there.
God, you are so right. Minnesota's a place where you can't even get in trouble if you try to. What about Lauri Markkanen? Trade him? Keep driving.
Trade him too. And this is man, every year he's the one guy that you see in these rumors where you could theoretically fit him on any team. The 2 teams I have in mind, particularly for me, Detroit and San Antonio. Detroit for the sheer purpose of giving Cade Cunningham a true Robin. I know Jalen Duren has played fantastic, but giving him a legitimate floor spacing weapon averaging over eight threes a game, shooting over 36%, giving you 28 points a game. I think you can't argue with that. Now, pairing Larry with Victor Wembanyama and San Antonio would be a basketball nerd's dream. I'm sure that the Jazz would ask for heaven and earth in terms of the first round picks, the pick swaps, and the players. But if you're the Spurs or if you're the Pistons and you're in this position, why not? Like, this thing only happens once or twice in the lifespan of an organization. And if you have a chance to capitalize on a young player, young talent that can elevate your ceiling, you do it. So I say trade him.
What about Trae Young? He's been out with a knee injury, but Atlanta's been able to hold their own. So trade or keep driving on Trae Young?
I would keep driving. I think the good thing about this injury or the absence that you're allowed to see what Jalen Johnson looks like in an elevated playmaking role. And he's been absolutely fantastic in terms of just his command of the offense in the half court, as well as being an elite rebounder, an elite scorer, a 3-level option. Pairing him with Trae Young should be the beginning of what should be a sustainable, campaign for the Hawks. Now, does that mean when Trae Young comes back, he has to dial some things back and put some more load onto Jalen Johnson? Probably, but that shouldn't be. I mean, if you go back to a couple years ago, that's what Trae Young was asking for in the first place. He wanted some help. He wanted someone to help take the pressure off of him. So Jalen Johnson clearly is that guy, but you have to see what it looks like for a bigger sample size. You can't just cut ties, at the quarter mark of the year. So I would say keep driving.
All right, before we get you out of here, you recently wrote about the Lakers and how Luka's become the system in LA. All right, so the question is, are the Lakers going to have issues balancing roles for Luka and LeBron when they get to actual, real competition on their schedule?
From an offensive standpoint, I don't think so. I think the real issue is defensively. They just don't have the talent to, get after some of these guards in terms of point of attack defenders, guys that can get under screens, the guys that can communicate with others on the floor. Offensively, they're going to be fine when you have Luka, LeBron, Austin Reeves. It's clear that Luka is the main guy. Austin Reeves should be the number 2, and LeBron should be the third option on this team. Offensively, they're going to figure it out, right? I know Rui complained about him getting one shot early in the week against Phoenix. That's going to work itself out. Defensively, I think they're 17th. JJ already talked about that the team wasn't as bad defensively as the numbers suggested. They are. So if you want to improve, if you want to be a real contender in the Western Conference, you're not getting that with the 18th ranked defensive efficiency. So until they really get after at the end of the floor, you're going to see more games like that.
What do you know? I mean, they have a hard time covering guards. They can't cover outside shooters particularly well, and their transition defense sucks. But other than that, it's fine. It's fine. Kelly, we appreciate you, man. Follow him on social media at Kelly Eco. Thanks for the time, as always, and the great insight, my friend.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kelly.
Good morning.
Great stuff from Kelly. All right, from sucks to not sucks. OKC set to make history? Yeah, we'll tell you about it next.
What's up, Yahoo Sports Daily? It's Dan Titus, and here's what happened in the association while you were sleeping. The Thunder still rolling. They took down the Warriors 124-112, pushing their winning streak to 13 straight games. Golden State made a little noise in the third quarter, but outside of that, it was all OKC. Steph Curry was in street clothes, Jimmy Butler left at halftime, and the Warriors defense was nowhere to be found. The Thunder shot 58% from the field, getting pretty much any look that they wanted. And gilgeous-alexander, just another masterclass in effortless 38 points, leading the Thunder to yet another victory. OKC is now 21-1 on the season, right on pace with the 2015-2016 Warriors that went 73-9. So I gotta ask, do you think that this Thunder squad is built to break that record? Back to you.
Caroline, Fenton, Jason Fitz, Titus, thanks so much for the late night update. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what it's going to take for everybody to stop and pay attention to this, Caroline, but like to me, we're watching the most dominant basketball team I think we've ever seen, and it's OKC. Like, I know that we all love the brand of Golden State, but I'm looking at an OKC team that, frankly, even when they play with their food, still beats you. Even when they take their foot off the gas, it's like they take little rests in the game and they still come out and just throttle you down. This OKC team, the way they move the ball, their depth, their ability to score, I'm on record with Caroline. What do you think? I think that this could be the greatest team of all time.
It's hard to argue against that because why would I? Why would I? And that's the thing, that the key to me and what was really the difference maker to me, at least in my own rationalization for this, for the Thunder. When I watch the Thunder and the game might be getting close, close is subjective, but close by Thunder terms. My thought isn't, uh-oh, are the Thunder in trouble? My thought isn't, uh-oh, is Team XYZ going to be able to pull this off? My question is, when are the Thunder going to put their foot back on the gas? When are the Thunder going to, in your terms, stop playing with their food and start figuring things out and start pulling away? Whenever the Thunder might even feel like they could potentially be in question. In my eyes, in my brain, it's never in question. I think the most, shocking thing maybe isn't the right word, but the biggest feather in the Thunder's cap is they have so many guys that can beat you in so many different ways. Let's just use last night, the Warriors game, for example. And of course, that was a not 100% Warriors team, but I digress. Chet goes off for 21, SGA off for 38, Jalen Williams off for 22, AJ Mitchell off for 10, and then you get about 30 points off the bench. Like, that kind of depth, that kind of consistency that we see from the Thunder core night in and night out, they're stifling defense night in and night out. I don't know of any team that can match that. And I understand this is an incredibly competitive and incredibly deep West. You still have the Rockets. You still have to get past the Lakers. You still have the Nuggets. You still have these teams that look like championship caliber teams in the West. But my point of comparison for all of those teams is the Thunder. My perspective of the West is who's the second best team in the West, because I am writing in Sharpie the Thunder in that number one spot in the West, even as deep and competitive as it is.
At some point, number one, this is a team that won 68 games last year. So when we're sitting here saying, oh my God, can they eclipse 73? Well, I mean, they got 68 last year and still didn't get respect going into the playoffs. Then you look at some of the analytics, like they rank second in turnover percentage. They rank first in turnovers forced across the entire NBA at this point. You start to look at some of their basic dominance when it comes to the way that they play and control the pace of the game. It's just absolutely the margin of victory, which I've mentioned 100 times. They lead the NBA in defensive rating. They allow 103.6 possessions or points per 100 possession. For point of reference, that's 7 points fewer than the next closest team. Nobody can touch their dominance. They have a net rating of 15.3, all while SGA is a reigning MVP that is just an unstoppable force every single night. Like, if you are looking for reasons to doubt the Oklahoma City Thunder, you got to tell me what they are, because I don't see any of them. When you talk about their ability to play on both ends of the court, which, again, I think is so augmented by the depth that they have. And then you factor in the through a large portion of this season, they didn't have Jalen Williams, right? Like, he missed 19 games this season, and unbelievably, as I was reading yesterday, found out that because he was bored and couldn't shoot with his right hand over the offseason, he just spent the entire offseason working on the offhand jumper because of the ligament damage in his wrist. So now you have a scorer that is capable of being a scorer with Either hand, like, how do you stop this team? I don't think that there's an easy answer. We talked a lot yesterday about their flexibility and their ability to be great for the next several years. But right now, in this moment, I genuinely believe that Oklahoma City is becoming this generation's Golden State. I'm old enough. I'll be the old guy in the room. I'm old enough to remember when nobody gave a damn about the Golden State Warriors. I think when you hit the level of dominance OKC is hitting right now, that's the way a young generation becomes super fans. No, it might not be Steph, and no, it might not be Draymond or Clay or KD or any of those things, but it doesn't matter. It's young players on a young team that will connect with the young audience. In 10 years, we're going to see OKC jerseys everywhere the exact same way we see Golden State jerseys everywhere right now.
It feels like they're the next dynasty, not just because of what they're doing right now, but for how well positioned they are for the future. It's not only just the young core that they can keep together for the foreseeable future. It's also the draft picks that they have, that they are poised, to your point, be that next Golden State-esque kind of dynasty in the NBA. I just wonder when we're going to start paying attention to OKC. When I say we as a sports society, because you always say, and I think it's a fair point, that I think leagues and teams should cater to the casual, not the diehards, because the diehards are going to be invested no matter what. But when are the sports casuals going to acknowledge the level of excellence that we are seeing from OKC? Because winning a championship last season, I don't think was enough, Fitz. I don't think it was enough to put them, squarely on the map as that next dynastic run in the NBA. Is, winning that regular season win total record, is that going to be enough? Is going back to back going to be enough? I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel like the Thunder, whether it's inside the NBA or outside the NBA, are getting their due.
Yeah, well, we're going to be Thunder buddies on this show because, frankly, to your point, I think that they have a shot at the the win record this year. I think they have the shot at unprecedented dominance in the postseason, and in that process, if they take down the Nuggets and they take down Luka, they take down some of these brands, that's just the way that you become a superstar. We'll be back tomorrow morning right here at 9 a.m. to keep breaking it down for you. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. Have a great day. Come back. See us tomorrow.